what you said on paper.
I wish that I could freely dream and be judged from within, haunted by a power that cannot see past my skin. My views are viewed as ignorant, my truth always denied. My history is shrouded in a spider web of lies. Isn't this America? Or is this America all a lie?
Of the freedom of speech, somewhere I read. Of the freedom of press, somewhere I read.
Well, welcome back to At the Round Table with MAMLEO. I'm your host, Larry Ellison, in studio with my brother from another, Dr. Bradley. The doctor is in the house giving you a checkup from the neck up. Good morning, my brother.
Well, I don't know how accurate the checkup is going to be this morning. I'm still trying, brother.
He's in vacation mode still, and he's getting ready to go back. He hasn't even unpacked. He's just changing the laundry out.
You're right. I have some things that's still tucked away in the suitcase. And just wash the things that I wore and put it back.
I'm looking forward to retirement.
Well, it's a good thing, brother.
Both him and his wife are retired former BPD.
Yes.
And now they're living the good life traveling. All right. We want to thank our sponsor, Guarantee Rate Mortgage Company. For all your mortgage needs, give branch manager Cora Holbrook a call at area code 781-342-0252. Guaranteed Rate Mortgage is located at 75 State Street in downtown Boston, Mass. Guarantee Rate Mortgage Company, guaranteed to exceed your expectations. With that said, the calling number here is 617-282-0685. 617-282-0685. Also a reminder today at from 12 to 1 p.m. is the No Books, No Balls event. It's going to be taking place at the Michael L. Bivens Park at 1980 Washington Street from 12 to 1 p.m. It's Cops That Care in conjunction with No Books, No Balls. So come on out and enjoy the event. Like I said, it's going to be a warm day, so make sure you stay hydrated and make sure you bring some water with you. Not anything sugary, because I'm telling you, it may temporarily, but water is the best thing on a day like today. Mm-hmm. So make sure you do that. Folks, we are pleased to present to some and reintroduce to others. The president of the city council has been honored to come in here. I called him and said, hey, look, there's a lot going on in the council. Would you do the honor of coming in to the MAMLEO broadcast? And he said, I will come in. And I'm proud to call him a friend. His family has been a friend to not just myself, but to MAMLEO. His dad was a former president, former ambassador, Ray Flynn. His family has been quite a friend of the communities of color. In fact, I learned a lot from talking to people like Billy Sylvester and Minister Don about the backdrop conversations that were going on. And your dad was very instrumental, and most people don't know, in a lot of the redistricting and I mean by the construction of all of the new innovations in Mecca, Grove Hall, that area there. I remember talking to Billy and Minister Don, and they were telling me, they said, the line had been drawn, it was shorter. And your dad said, no, let's expand it up, so that more people get taken care of. Mm. There's just a lot of people don't know that. They just think that folks were taking care of certain sections of the city. And that, I wasn't considered. I know, look at Dr. Bradley's face like, yeah. So,
I didn't know that, man.
Yeah, okay. So that is, like I said, people, take the time to learn and not just be so judgmental. Mm-hmm. So, again, we're honored to have the president of City Council, Ed Flynn, who represents South Boston in that neighborhood, but is a friend of the city. Everyone throughout the city. He's not just representing his neighborhood. I know whenever I call and folks call, he's there. But folks, the calling number here is 617-282-0685. 617-282-0685. I say good morning. I'm going to call you Ed because I consider you a friend. Yeah. I know your official title. So good morning, sir. Welcome to the round table. Welcome back to the round table. A little bit about what you represent, and we're going to get into the council because I know folks want to know what's going on, and it's been a lot.
Well, thank you, Larry, and thank you, Dr. Bradley, and the producer as well is doing a tremendous job. Honored to be with all of you this morning. And before I start, I want to I was listening on the way in from South Boston, listening to the program, and I was listening to the woman Mindy talking about her tragedy. But what really struck me is during her difficult and tragic time, she's still giving back to families and
turned her pain into a purpose.
Yeah, and it really hit me that here's a woman that's had a terrible loss, but she's trying to make the lives of other people better by helping them with various supplies, cleaning supplies or washing supplies, and she's food supplies. But she's there. She's making the community better, not looking for recognition. But I was really touched by that story.
Yeah. Well, I think, matter of fact, I had told her without even checking with you first. I told her, I said, you were going to be on our broadcast, and I definitely want to connect you guys because I know that's the type of family background you come from. It's not about recognition. It's about getting help where it's needed. And people, Mary Franklin, when she was talking, it just resonated with me because Mary Franklin, who some people thought, she was a little boy, God rest her soul, but was going through a very similar traumatic, and we're seeing a spike in violence here in the city. It's one of the issues that you guys raised in the schools, and there was pushback and tried to make it seem like it was racially motivated. And I told folks, this is not racist. I happen, for full disclosure, I work in the schools. I see the violence every day. I see it now where it's that kids are out of school. We're seeing it. You've probably been told about it over in South Bay. And the violence that these young people are inflicting. So the problem is real, and addressing it doesn't make it racist because someone that doesn't look like the people that are perpetrating this are saying we need to do something.
Right. When I was in between jobs in the mid 90s, I was a substitute school teacher at South Boston High School, at Charlestown High School, and I kind of observed closely the Boston Public School security officers. And I thought they played a tremendous role in the schools. They actually listened to the students. They actually developed a good communication with the students. They, in my opinion, they treated these high school kids with respect, and they were able to reach them before any major violence actually took place. And I kind of admired that in these officers. And there really wasn't a need to bring in the Boston police because the Boston school police officers were doing their job. They were doing it effectively, and they were, in my opinion, I think people might disagree, but they were actually role models.
You're right.
And students were looking up to these men, mostly men of color, and I think we need that type of presence in the schools, and I know that's a controversial issue is security in our Boston public schools, but if you don't have a safe school, learning is very difficult.
Well, I would argue that learning will not happen, without safety in the school, because I used to, just full disclosure, after I retired from the Boston PD and while I was in my PhD program, I worked as the Director of Climate and Safety for the Randolph Public School System. And in that capacity, I was responsible for the safety of all the schools and working very closely with Randolph PD, in particular Chief Pace at the time. But my point here is that one of the students came to me and he said, it's important, my safety is important to me, because I want to go home and I want to be comfortable. I want to make sure that I can come back and forth to school without any harassment. But I can't begin to focus on what the teacher is talking about when I know I have to fight Johnny or Joe. And that really struck me. It's like, not one individual in that classroom has a right to disturb the education of other individuals. And it's incumbent upon the administrators to be able to remove that individual who's just disrupting education. So I never understood the logic around removing officers out of the school system in Boston, because I think it served multiple purposes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I became a police officer because I saw someone who looked like me who was a police officer, and I realized I could do that. If he could do it, I could do it. And so I think just being there, is a large part of the whole fight.
Well, let's just unpack. Like I said, for full disclosure, again, I work in the schools. Last year, we took an enormous amount of firearms. We've had staff and students shot at schools on school property. We had knives. We've seen the violence increase. And to your point, with the removal of the presence of the school police. They're now called safety services. They don't have police powers. And at times that is needed, unfortunately. You need someone who has the authority to get things under control. And if there are consequences that need to take place in the immediate, that should be addressed. That's no longer, that now has been shifted to where a 911 call for the Boston police to come and deal with something that these folks would have dealt with or got wind of and might have tampered it down in the partnerships with them in my unit, to make sure that we're on top of this before it gets to that point. That information is no longer allowed to be shared with us in the way it used to be when they were law enforcement, because they had special police powers. They were required to cooperate with us. They no longer have to do that. Everything has to go through these channels. You know, and I've said numerous times, do young people, when they come to City Hall, do they have to go through a metal detector?
Everyone has to go through a metal detector at City Hall on the Center Plaza entrance, as you know, on the Congress Street entrance. Everyone has to go through a metal detector, and it is inconvenient, and it does take an extra 2 minutes of or 3 minutes maybe of time, but it's worth it. I think people are actually fine with that,
Right.
And I think the parents of BPS students actually want metal detectors in the schools, and I actually think they want a public safety presence in the school as well. Maybe elected officials don't want it. Maybe social media doesn't want it. But I really believe that the parents of these students
Right.
do want some public safety presence in the Boston public schools. They want their child to be safe, to be in an environment where they can learn effectively.
And as you pointed out, rightfully so, is that the people that were there were not just someone being called randomly 911. These are people who are in that building, the same people every single day. The people in my unit, where it's divided up, they work in the same areas every single day. That's the relationship building. It's not just a strange officer showing up and that has no relationship with the school. It's usually it was the school police officer and the Boston school officer that responded to the building. And
So let me ask this question, just being, on the outside looking in. After a year of observing the school and how the school is operating without the BPD in the building, is there any conversation happening about returning them back into the building?
The great question. And the answer is no, and not in that. First of all, Boston police were never physically in any school building.
Okay.
We were never there. The school police were. Every other city in town, their resource officers are law enforcement from their local community. We never operated. We were a support for them because a lot of times these issues spilled outside the building.
Okay.
The school police had special police powers from the Boston police. They were in the buildings.
But okay, maybe I should ask the question another way then. Have there been discussions about returning those special police powers back to the school police
There's
officer?
been discussion, but it most likely will not happen because they say it sends the wrong message, which I don't understand. It's just the presence, the uniform somehow are disturbing to the kids. It makes them feel like they're in prison, which, I mean, realistically, what is more traumatic to a young person? Seeing one of their friends or a staff member shot or stabbed or assaulted, or just someone in a uniform that, the people wear uniform. That's just a convenient excuse to say we're not, because at the time when this was all taking place, we had the George Floyd, it was this very anti-police sentiment. And it was an opportunity to get rid of something that
as a parent, don't get me wrong now on this. I really appreciate the effort to protect the young minds and the safety of our children. However, when you look at the entertainment, when you look at the music they're listening to, and you look at all these other access they have to violence, do we really think that we're going to do any major protection of the young minds by having a police officer in the school to protect them so that they can learn? We know through research, we know through just being educated adults that not much learning is happening in an environment when a child is unsafe. It's just not happening. We can articulate all the different types of theories that we want to, but that child is not thinking about or trying to process or understand that theory when he or she's worrying about their safety, their
Right.
fundamental safety. So we
Right.
have to address that issue before we even begin to think about quality education.
Right. So councils of color, most if not all of them, when you guys proposed this metal detectors being bad, they made it seem like it was racially motivated, because if you looked at it on the surface, the white counselors were in favor of this metal detectors, and I'm in agreement with them. You know, and people know our history at MAMLEO. We're not someone who's going to stand for something that we feel is racially motivated. This is a public safety issue for these young people. That became one of the contentious issues in the council, and it got really ugly during that time.
That's accurate, Larry, and there's been many of those types of issues, unfortunately, that have divided the council along racial lines. You know, to be honest and to be frank, and it's unfortunate because, you know, who really is impacted the most are the young people in the city. And you know, I've lived in the city my whole life, other than the time I've been in the military. Always had great respect for you, Larry, and the Boston police, especially especially police of color. You know, Willis Saunders or Billy Celester or any of these, Tom Scott. But I think they provided over the years an incredible service to the residents of the city, including especially in the black community. They provided the safety, but they also provided and acted as role models. People could look up to these men and women, and you know, get into various fields in public safety or teaching. But I think it's important that, you know, we deal with difficult issues, but we try to put personalities aside. We try to put politics aside, and try to do the best we can to educate our young people, to provide them with a good learning and healthy and safe learning opportunity, so that they can be productive citizens, that they can get a good job in the city.
And the reason why, you know, I want to dive into that a little bit more, and we're going to grab into some of these calls. I know the lines of people are waiting to speak to you as well, is that I think it does a disservice when things are really racially motivated, when we use that and we throw that out there constantly, that because they're all for white, you know, because the issues that you guys have wrote are legitimate concerns. The education level in the Boston public schools is nowhere it needs to be. Most of the high schools are in what the state considers, matter of fact, the state is not racially motivated in taking over the school system, thinking about it because they want to be racist. It's because they're looking at the test scores, they're looking at what learning is taking place in these buildings. It's not lack of money. I think the budget for the Boston public schools is close to $1.4 billion. The largest chunk of money goes to the Boston public schools. And if you ask people, well, I'm investing $1.4 billion at, what am I getting in return for that? Schools that are, kids are not learning, unsafe environments. Who would say keep dumping more money on that if we're not going to really address the root of the problem, which is not providing a safe environment for the kids to learn?
I think what we have to also guard ourselves against is that good ideas are not necessarily racist because they come from someone who doesn't look like me.
Right.
You know what I mean? If it's a good idea, it's a good idea. I mean, I really don't care, well, you know, that, you know, it coming from an Irish brother or Italian brother or black. It doesn't matter to me. Okay, let's talk about how do we make our children safe so they can engage in education, so they can compete in a world market.
Well,
and that's the other piece, is that we're no longer competing against the guy in Chicago or the guy in Atlanta. We're competing against the guy in Beijing,
right?
You know, the guy in Seoul, Korea.
Right.
You know, so we have to start thinking about how do we make our schools safe so that our kids can compete in a world marketplace.
Well, to that point, Dave Serlis, who started SOS, Save Our Schools, he started that because here's a white male who lives in East Boston, saw the problems in the school, and his kids are in very safe schools. But he said, hey, as a parent, as a human being, I've got to do something. It wasn't racially motivated. Yeah. The problem was in these neighborhoods, in these schools. And he's a frequent guest here. In fact, on the MAMLEO show. And people are seeing that folks who care. Your family has a history of working with folks regardless of race. Mm-hmm. And that's why, for me, I found it very offensive. I found it, you know, in distaste to say that because someone is addressing a problem that doesn't look like the people that are affected by it, that they can't weigh in on it. That's just crazy.
It doesn't make any sense to
That's
me.
just crazy. So again, we're going to grab these calls. So right now, it seems that the Boston City Council is as divided as I've seen it in quite a long time. And there's been some contentious issues in the history of the City Council. But we've got quite a few folks there that are elected officials, and their behavior is been called into question. And I know recently you addressed that. Can you just share with our audience what it is that you brought forward to the council as it relates to the ethical behavior of some of your members?
Yes, I did send a memo about the troubling accusations against several of my colleagues, including Councilor Lara and Councilor Arroyo, ethical, legal lapses in judgment that I found troubling. I didn't want to put out a statement on that, but I felt as the City Council President, I didn't have an option not to do it. I don't get to pick and choose what issues I want to work on. I have to work on the issues that are on my table, on my desk, and that was one of them. It would have been easier not to criticize them or criticize my colleagues or the body, but I felt the residents deserved
Let me just
an honest
interrupt
opinion.
you. I wouldn't call criticism holding people accountable. So I think that you're not criticizing, you're holding them accountable as you do yourself. That, as any other city, I'm a city employee, there are standards and ethics that I know I have to abide by, and I'm sure that's the same in the council, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That's right.
So what you're saying to them is that these are the rules that we play by, and everyone else has to play by. We're not above that. We see it with our former president here, right, who thinks the rules don't and the law doesn't apply. Does it not apply equally to city councilors?
It does. It does apply to them, and we have had a series of rules meetings on the council to discuss what the rules are. Unfortunately, Larry, most of my colleagues don't attend the Rules Committee meetings. I've had 3 Rules Committee meetings that I chair. I'm the chair of the Rules Committee, and at times there was 1 city councilor that would be present. At times there would be 2 or 3 present. And I've had councilors that never attended any of them. And it's a boring meeting. But it's the nuts and bolts of learning about city government, its neighborhood services, its constituent services. There's nothing sexy or glamorous about being a city councilor. It's not about the media. It's not about social media. It's not being in the newspaper. It's about addressing quality of life issues in your district, cleaning streets, cleaning potholes, improving schools, providing leadership to young people, be an example. But there's nothing glamorous about it. It's nuts and bolts. You grind it out and you do your job, and you're accountable. And if you're not accountable, people know, and your district will unfortunately suffer if you're not focused on quality of life and neighborhood services.
So let me get this straight. So you're saying that this ethics meeting, very few people show up. Why is it not required? Is it required? If not, why is it not required that this is part of, before you even sit in the seat, you get sworn in, that you're required to attend these and sign that you understand? Like, we have to sign, becoming police officers, or we have to sign the rules and regs, and we have to sign that whether we read it or not, we take an ownership of it, we understand it, and we have an understanding of it. So we can't use that as a defense. So I didn't show up. I don't, I just blow it off because I find it boring. It's not required that they attend these?
No, it's not required.
Wow.
Ultimately, they are responsible to the electorate that put them in office. I mentioned it at the beginning. I had the privilege to serve 25 years in the Navy. Maybe it's not a good example, but my entire life, I had the same responsibilities and same way of doing things, being accountable, being responsible, learning from the military, where you just couldn't pass the buck. You couldn't say, oh, it was the other guy's fault, or I'm not going to do it. You had to do your job, and if you didn't do your job, there would be disciplinary action. And that's how I grew up. That's how I learned about being accountable, being on time, being there, being responsible. And it's not about you. What it's really about is developing in mentoring younger people that want to start in politics, that want to start in government, and we're not providing that example to people.
So let me just process this because I'm over 60. All right. So there's no recourse that you as the president of the council can move on when your members refuse to attend a very rudimentary, basic meeting on the function of their office. There's nothing that you can do to encourage that individual to attend.
And it sounds like, to your point, is the only accountability comes from their constituents who elect them to office. I understand why you want the separation there, so that they're elected by these people. But this is not about whether or not they're voting on an unpopular bill or a resolution. This is about their personal behavior. That anyone else who was not elected, that's a city employee that receives city funds, would be held accountable.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a sad commentary, to be honest with you, that you're going to actually run for office and go through all the work to get there, and then once you get there, you really don't care about how it functions.
Right.
Or learning about how it functions.
When you're in the building in City Hall,
Yeah.
You're in the elevator or you're meeting department heads for coffee. That's how you learn about city departments. That's how you learn about meeting people, who to call when you need something done at Public Works. You don't necessarily have to call the commissioner, but you need to know who to call to get a street cleaned. And if you're not in the building and you're not developing those personal relationships by meeting people, you're doing a disservice to your residents, you're doing a disservice to your community, and it's about showing up and being accountable.
Yeah, I mean, I can see, just seeing that type of interaction and not doing it, how it kind of like would show itself.
It erodes.
Later on when you're trying to run for office for the re-election, and then you're not getting anything done, and that's the reason why you're not getting it. So I can see that it will be, derogatory, for lack of a better term.
Problematic.
Problematic for that office, for that individual to be re-elected. But it seems to me, in order for you to actually hit the road running, because a lot of people, we don't teach civics in our school system. A lot of people wouldn't have a clue what the city councilor does other than negotiate the budget.
Well, sometimes getting elected is the easy part. Now governing is where the hard work comes in. Let's grab some of these calls. I know folks been patiently waiting. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the round table with MAMLEO. I know we got 3 calls and City Council President Ed Flynn. You have a question? Jamal, you there?
He's probably trying to get off the mute. No, Jamal.
Jamal, you there?
He's probably trying to get on mute. Just go to the next one.
Yeah. All right, let's go to Mr. Wright. Are you there? Okay. Jamal,
can you hear Jamal?
Jamal, okay. It was.
Can you hear me now?
Engineer. I can hear you now.
Yeah, we got you, Jamal. We got you. I'm sorry.
No. Let the other brother go first.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Wright.
Yeah, let the other brother go first.
I'm sorry.
Well, Mr. Ellison, good morning. Mr. Bradley and City Council President Ed Flynn.
Hey, Bill.
It's good to hear you discussing this topic. One thing I wanted to quickly point out is that I believe there's a serious flaw in the City Hall security system at the Center Plaza level. When you walk in, you can see that employees go through gates and they use their ID badge to open those gates. The problem with that is there's a presumption that no city employee would ever bring a weapon to work, etc. And you may recall the very serious incident that took place at New York City Hall some years ago, in which a sitting city councilor brought a challenger with him to City Hall and walked around the metal detectors with that challenger, who upstairs in the city council chamber shot and killed that councilor.
Right. So let me because I appreciate what you're saying, and it's a valid point, but I don't think that they're representing this as something being 100%. I think it's, they're minimizing the number of people that come through there. They're taking a calculated risk and saying that it's unlikely that it's going to, not that it won't be, but it's unlikely that it's going to be a city employee that's going to cause this type of problem for us, because we know that they've been vetted in some way. So they're taking a calculated risk. They're not saying it can't happen. This is not 100%. So I agree. There is the
probably will not happen.
Exactly. It's just like
probability
you go to the airport and you don't see the pilots and stuff going through the same lines you go through. They minimize the risk. Not saying that a pilot not going to do anything crazy or one of the flight attendants, but they're minimizing the risk that these folks have been vetted, and it's less likely. Not that it won't happen, but it's less likely. So,
and Larry, as you know from studying our history and everything you see in daily newspapers, these things happen all the time.
No, I don't disagree with that. That's not what I'm representing at all. I'm saying is that I can understand why that is. It's just like a law enforcement, right? We have all police officers who, unless they're under some investigation, have a firearm.
Yep.
Any one of them could come in with their pass and come in the door and take all of us out. It's a calculated risk that most likely that's not going to be the person that engages us in that violence. We're not saying it won't happen, but the likelihood we're taking a calculated risk that is not likely going to be the person we have to confront.
I get your point, but I also want to say that as far as the school children and their parents, I would rather have it be that some people think that somehow it's a negative for young children, especially Black and Latino children, to have what they talk about, a system looks like, school to prison. However, I would rather them have to think about that than to have to call a parent at work and tell them that their child has been shot or killed.
Absolutely, and we've seen that around the country. And like I said, we're on borrowed time here, waiting for, unfortunately, something like that. We've had that call being made at the Tech Boston School, where a teacher and a student were shot on the grounds, and someone had to make that call. But thank you, Bill. Appreciate it.
I'm well aware, and thank you for your work.
No, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
It's good to hear from Bill. Bill's a good friend.
Yeah, we've got the calls there. So who's next?
Jamal.
Oh, Jamal. Oh, okay, Jamal, go ahead. We're going to take you next.
All right. Y'all got me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Good morning, Jamal.
So, first of all, good morning, Council President Ed Flynn. What I would like to say is, when I'm talking about issues of like racial humanity is what I'm going to call it. So, for instance, obviously you love your father. Your father was a beloved mayor and, and then ambassador and all these type of things, right? But we also understand that, things, at least under the Boston regime, were also not perfect. Great strides were made in terms of racial relations, but everything was not perfect, right? And so now, for many, the hope is that, I guess, and this is the struggle of a son who has a prominent father, for many, they're looking at you as Ray Flynn 2.0, as opposed to Ed Flynn 1.0. Right? But you did come up in some of the same things that I came up in, and everything was not perfect. So now the hope is that we can make things even better. So yes, lines were open of communication with the Black community and whatnot. A couple of things that you go through in your position is, I believe sometimes you guys rely on information from unreliable sources, if you will. In private communication, I guess I'm making it no longer private, but things that I've sent to you in your, city council thing, like I said, I'm not going to protest you in city council. I'm not going to think of a creative name for you. I'm not going to be outside your house. I just want to send you a letter and let it be recognized. And that brings to the next point, elevating proper protest. Because in the recent years, I'll say the past 5 to 10 years, I believe it began with Occupy, a lot of elected officials have been kind of forced to respond to the most supercilious of demands, while at the same time, not in my opinion, hearing from the people who've been in the trenches all this time, who have very serious issues that are well documented and data to back it up. And once again, we're not going to call you names and stand outside your house. Who does that?
All right, I'm going to let him respond. Is that
hold on, and let me just end with this. And to the point, we've already found agreement, as he knows, with my position to, remove Albert Dapper O'Neill from city halls, room 801, and all this type of things. We have agreement on that. We don't have agreement on Kelly. He views Kelly different. Great. That's what this is about. It's about dialogue and discourse. So once again,
civil dialogue,
Yes,
like you're having
yes.
here, and that's the difference.
Yes.
For what we're seeing is it's not civil. We've had disagreements historically at the council with people,
and it's okay.
Right, Councilor Yancey comes to mind, who's someone who has been very vocal at his time there. But I never saw him addressing people in this way. I never saw his personal conduct being called into question in this way, and that's the difference that we want to highlight.
One more thing. Council President Flynn, also too, just because I used to work in city council back in the day and all this, I know all this. Can you also please answer those questions, but also to give a brief breakdown? Like, I don't think people realize like all the different committees that are there, and also to the committee of the whole. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think people really understand the city council structure. So if you can give a little civics 101 on that as well.
Absolutely, I'll let him answer that. But I think it goes to Dr. Bradley's point, where we're saying that having removed civics from the schools, this a lot of times you learned a lot of that before you even graduated. Right now, you're not getting it at all. So you want to respond to Jamal's question?
Yeah, and I've always had great respect for Jamal. We agree, we disagree, but we've always had a civil and respectful relationship. So thank you for the question. What I would say. Let me your first comment, and I think it's a fair point. Mayor Flynn did a lot of great things in the city, and they also had a lot of struggles and challenging times in the city, and I acknowledge that things weren't perfect, things weren't good all the time. It was a challenging time in the city, and it was because of the residents of the city, and I think
busing was going. There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on, and city employees really stepped up to the plate and did the best they could. So I think, Jamal, that's a fair point you made. The second point on on me, I think as a 55-year-old father and husband that served 25 years in the military, served in a war.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you. I have a different life than my parents, certainly, and don't always agree with my parents and father. I do what I think is best for my constituents and for the city. The other point you made, as it relates to the city council and how it operates, yes, there are city council committees, and the city council president and the city councils, that the first thing they do in January with the start of the new city council is establish the rules. They also, city council president always also establishes who the committee chairs are and who's on those committees. And the city council president, when a hearing order is filed, the city council president decides what committee that hearing order should go into. That's just a little bit of basic information.
So,
and then the final one is the city council president is chair of the rules committee and the committee on the whole, and every city council member is a member of the committee on the whole, and that's where any type of issue that needs to be discussed should be discussed by every single city council member at the committee of the whole.
So just one quick follow-up on that. So if you appoint someone as the president of the council, and you guys change the rules, so now you serve 2 years rather than the 1 year, right, as the president of the council. If someone is not performing, can you remove them from these committees without cause, like just because they're not performing?
I technically, yes, I technically can do that. I can change the committee assignments. I can change the committee chairs or the vice chairs. It's almost never done. I did it once with Councilor Arroyo. I felt like he wasn't performing, and his ethics weren't there, and I made a decision to remove him as vice president of the city council, and a couple of committee chairs as well. That didn't go over very well, but I do stand by my decision, and I still stand by my decision to remove him. But if I feel like I technically have the ability to decide and to make committee changes anytime the city council president wants, but if you do that it will have a very negative, devastating impact on the body, and probably will not recover because it will cause so much problems, disunity, and it would not be healthy for the body. And it's something I could only do if I under very
Rarely.
drastic situation, and I haven't seen that yet. Again, the only time I did do that was with Councilor Royal.
I'm just curious, as a newly minted city councilor, what would give me the incentive to be the chair of a committee? Is there any extra pay or notoriety? What would give me that incentive?
No, that's a good question. You don't get any extra pay, but if you want to do the job the right way, and you want to learn about the committee and its impact over your district and throughout the city, the impact that committee has, say the Public Education Committee, you could be the expert on knowing exactly what is happening in the Boston Public Schools. You have the ability to have a hearing anytime you want. You can talk to the BPS superintendent and mayor about any particular issue. You can get confidential updates on issues. But if you have to put the time in to do that.
So the incentive would be I would have access.
I want to grab this.
You would have access,
Right.
and you could make an impact and make positive change.
Right.
Okay, got it. All right,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you, Jamal. I want to, before I take this next call, is there any formal to follow up on Dr. Bradley's question? You become a new city councilor, you're just coming from wherever, private, industry, public, whatever. Is there any formal training that they get? Because they're independent operators. Each city councilor is elected by their body. Is there any formal training that they get before they get seated to the committees that they're chairing, or any knowledge of the subject matter that they're addressing?
No, there's very little formal training. When you get elected in November, you get sworn in January. There are several meetings that they invite you to with city departments, with the council president, and talking about the budget, the role of the city council. There are some informal meetings, but nothing structured like it should be.
That's the point.
Like
that's the point that people really think that there must be some formal training, and that's why I asked the question. And is it to say that no, I could be Joe, a barber, and get elected, and now I am in charge of part of participating in a multi-billion-dollar budget and operation of a city, and I have no knowledge of the work. That would be like taking me off the street and giving Dr. Bradley and I guns and saying, go out there and figure it out, how to be a policeman, not having any inner workings on how it's done. I mean, that just doesn't seem to make sense.
Not to justify the inaction, but COVID had a devastating impact on the city. A lot of people in the city, in the state, in downtown, in private businesses, they just don't want to come back to work. Unfortunately, I've been trying to have the BPDA be in person. They're not in person right now. These hearings, the Zoning Board of Appeals are not in person. We need people back in town, back in the building. We need city councilors back in the building. I think there's a room. There's a Zoom meetings and remote hearings are good, but they're for the public, and they're for people with the elderly or persons with disabilities that can't get into City Hall. But my colleagues should be at their desk doing their job, learning about city government, especially when you start out.
Yeah.
Your first year, you need to be in the building in studying and learning. I've made it my priority to be in the building every day from 9 to 5, 5 days a week. I got my city council colleagues know I have an open door policy. Anytime they want to come into my office without an appointment, come in, talk about any issue. If they have a concern in their district that's not being addressed, say a pothole on Center Street in West Roxbury, come in. I'll show you how to. I'll let you use my contacts, the phone numbers I have for city officials to get things done. I know how the city operates. I know the city departments. but people need to be present. People need to show up. I don't think we have done a good job of showing up to the office.
We have a good job of showing out, but not showing up. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the roundtable. Good morning, Ditko.
Good morning. I just have a comment and also 4 questions for City Councilor Wayford. My comment goes like this. And
it's Ed Flynn.
And this is no guilt shaming or make you feel bad, Councilor, but I'm sorry, but you kind of a little program. It hurts me when you later earlier in the broadcast you said parents when you're talking about the Boston Public Schools. I was raised by a single parent, and for you not to put a single parent in the equation, it hurts me. Yeah? And now I'm worse the voter. It really hurts me to my core when it comes to people like you always saying parents plural, but not single parent. It really does. Huh?
Well, I'm not sure what's offensive by that, and I'm not defending. I'm saying when you say parents, it's just in general. I don't think he's leaving out single parents. I think it's just in general parents. So I want to move away from that because we don't have a lot of time, and I want to get, if you have another question that has a little bit more substance, honestly, that we could address, because that's semantics there.
I do. And my question is, are you going to work with T. Michael Thomas in making sure that the People's Academy is up and running to give him the tangibles that he needs? Because this man has been doing it for almost by himself for nearly 2 decades.
So let me address this. I'm sure you're aware of the People's Academy.
I've visited his location.
Yeah, so T. Michael Thomas, who's trying to erect a structure there at Townsend and Warren Street. It's been this. He's acquired the land from the city, but really that's where it started and stopped, and it's going to be quite an expensive endeavor. I know even at MAMLEO we've been trying to get our property, our building erected there as well, and this new administration hasn't been as friendly as previous administrations in helping navigate through that. So I guess his question is there any assistance that you could give to T. Michael and the People's Academy in helping to get it? I know it's not on your district, I guess, as he's asking as the president of the council.
Yeah, that's a good question. I did have an opportunity to visit with them maybe 6 months ago. I know. I think it's actually in City Council Frank Baker's district, if I'm not mistaken.
He's always highlighted that Frank Baker, who's not running again, and probably the same reason why City Council Flaherty has withdrawn, that he's going to step aside.
Yeah, but I would support that program any way I can. To be honest with you, I haven't done much on it. But I am willing to do more and to be more active on it. And I should have been more active on it in the past. But I'm willing to work and to try to be a positive leader on that issue. Yeah. And maybe we can stay in contact. I do know Senator Nick Collins has been a supporter as well. But I'm available to talk more about that.
All right, thank you, Ditko. You listen to At the Roundtable with MAMLEO. The call-in number is 617-282-0685. 617-282-0685. So we're in studio, and we're honored to have him. City Council President Ed Flynn is here with us. He's taking your calls. He's not running from anything here, so we appreciate that. And we're having a real spirited conversation here. One of the things that has come up, and I got to be honest, I'm one of those folks, and I don't have a problem with people, like you said, you talked about a lot of the shortcomings of the city council and things that are not working. But one of the things that there seems to be a consensus is pay raises for city councils. And again, I'm not saying that people should not be paid a fair wage, but it doesn't seem to be keeping up with other city workers. Like, for fair disclosure, I still work for the police department. We haven't had a contract in years. Mm-hmm. I know you've been a very proponent of public safety and supporting that, and there are folks who feel they keep cutting the budget. We're seeing a deficiency. We're short around 400 last night. I mean, constantly they're looking for bodies that don't exist, right? No one is coming to help because the help is just not there. 100 in the academy class, when you're losing 150, you just do the math. We're not keeping up. We have a public safety problem here, and we're not attracting people to this profession because of the way that people are representing or misrepresenting that everyone should be cast with that same brush.
I think that's a major crisis facing the city, the lack of police officers. I actually think we need to hire 300 to 400 police officers every year consistently for the next 10, 15 years. We have Boston police officers, young men and women that have been out of the academy for 2-3 years that are going to other neighboring cities throughout, or towns throughout Greater Boston, Cambridge, or Arlington, or Braintree, because they don't want
Or the fire department.
or the fire department,
Which is
and that's a major problem. And we're having officers that are retiring much earlier than they could have. They could have stayed an extra 4 or 5 years, but they're really tired of the job and they're burnt out. And public opinion is having a negative impact on our police department. The forced overtime. Police officers don't want to work 16 hours a day, 4 or 5 days a week. It's unhealthy. It's unhealthy for the department. It's unhealthy for the officer, for their family,
for the public.
For the public. You don't make good decisions after working 14 hours, 15 hours. And if there's a robbery and you're going to respond to something at 2 o'clock in the morning after working 14-hour day, you're not on top of your game. It also impacts the family, the police officer's family, their marriage, their children. You can't see your kids at a sports game. I know it's the contractor's in arbitration, binding arbitration, or is heading that way. I actually think if we're going to make officers work 16 hours a day, a part of that pay after the 8 hours, that should be factored in towards their pension.
Yeah.
If we're afraid to address the issue of hiring more police officers in this city, and we're not going to do it, then let's pay these police officers and ensure that they're getting a proper pension, because they're working those hours.
Right.
They don't want to work those hours,
Right.
but that might be the only way to deal with it. And again, I think the police officers do an exceptional job in the city. I think the residents, when I go to a meeting, and I go to meetings every night. I represent South Boston, the South End, Chinatown. I represent the most residents living in public housing. Residents ask me. The first person that speaks at a community meeting usually is the captain or the community service officer. They say, we need more police officers in this neighborhood. Can we have more police officers in Peters Park? They're doing an exceptional job, but we don't have enough officers. Flynn, what are you doing about it? Captain, we need more police officers. I've never heard in my life, as a member of the city council, Councilor Flynn, what we need to do is downsize the police department.
Right. To that point, we've got a couple of minutes. I don't know if you have a few minutes on the other side of the break. Okay. So thank you. He's going to stay with us. So great, because the calls are coming in. The other thing that's issue, not just Boston, but for teachers as well, is the residency counselor. Right? Is that Boston's become so expensive to live. You know, you represent an area in South Boston that's historically has been expensive. It's even more expensive now. Recently, Boston Police Department put out a lateral transfer. I think they got 3 people, because the biggest sticking point is that they can't afford to move back into the city. And people that are trying to attract talent to people who live here, they can't afford it. Boston has become unaffordable on what most people work. I mean, with police departments, you forced overtime, you might be making a little more. But the average city worker doesn't have accessibility to overtime, and the pay doesn't allow them to live in the city that they serve. And I don't think that's really being addressed in a manner that we're forcing people to live someplace they can't afford, and we're losing talent because of it.
Yeah, just one example I've focused on: security officers, municipal security officers that patrol city buildings, including City Hall and the bowling building. Most of those unionized, they're all unionized workers. Young men and women of color, they're working without a contract. They're making, I don't know, $22, $23 an hour. They're doing the same. They're working 16 hours a day. They can't afford their bills, and they're forced to live in the city. One young woman, a single mother, she was saying to me, she works 16 hours a day. She looks at a thing of Campbell's soup. She's buying a thing of Campbell's soup for her and her kid, and it said $2, and she had like $1.80 on her, and she couldn't buy it. Yeah. So we're forcing those people to live in a city that they can't afford. Yeah, right. It's unhealthy.
Hold that thought. We're going to have to take our break. We're at the top of the hour. Again, City Council President Ed Flynn is in studio. He's been gracious enough to give us a few minutes on the other side of the break. When we're going to take a break. You listen at the Roundtable, man. We'll take our break. We'll be right back. Thank you.
So if I never see ya, never get the chance to meet ya. No, I came up from the bottom, always rooting for the underdog. I wrote 300 songs in 1 year, Boogie will tell you I'm on it. I got unreleased songs for days, they don't want it. Eat any MC in the game, it ain't a challenge. If your music reflects who you are, then you's a coward. I can see through the lies you ain't living what you spitting. If your money's so long, why your dog's in prison? Why your baby mom's stripping, why your mom's still living in that same broken home that you used to sell piffin'? You ain't gotta lie to me to sell me a track. You ain't gotta rock fake jewels or walk around strapped. I respect artists getting money, but love them for spitting crack. And the fact that one track can move a family out the trap. It's a dream for us lost souls brought up in the mix. I'm motivated by the artists coming out in my midst, and the artists that paved the way when I didn't exist. Music's a skyscraper, I'm just trying to add a couple bricks. This is for the dreamers. They say I am a dreamer, cause I still believe that anything is possible as long as you work hard. Hustle real hard, hustle real hard, hustle real hard, hustle. So if I never see ya, never get the chance to meet ya. No, I came up from the bottom, always rooting for the underdog.